Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing fine. This is a very quick feedback that I want to put together for you on the exam to help you know what was expected of you. And then perhaps you're also able to check your expectations and then know the extent to which we have been extremely liberal with you. Okay. So the exam question one, I mean, you have the question there, you can check it, but apart from the preamble, the direct question was for you to write a convincing diagnosis of the most probable cause of nausea in both of your patients by adopting the most appropriate, see, definitely article there, the most appropriate, also what, uh, italicized and boldened. The most appropriate of J.S. Mills's methods of causalism. This is unit 9, okay? So that's the most appropriate would be looking for would be the joint method of agreement and difference. It's a joint method, two couples. Okay, so it's not just one instance, two couples. And then the fallacy we're thinking would be the causes, confusion and correlation for causal connection. Someone may say overlooking a common underlying cause. Both ladies may have had something else. Maybe they put on some perfume in the room before coming to eat that hasn't been captured. Okay, so that's also a possibility. So if you got the most appropriate of the methods correct, we give you 5 marks. If you get the fallacy correct, we give you 5 marks. If it's not exactly correct, but it is around that, we give as much as 4 marks for even incorrect answers, but explained well. You see, if I say incorrect, so it might not be the exact fallacy we're looking for, or the exact method we're looking for, but I can tell that the person, especially the method of difference, some chose the method of difference, but they argued it well. Some chose the method of agreement, they argued it well. If you didn't mention any of them at all, like some people say, the man may be jealous of the other woman and may have put poison in the woman. I mean, J.S. Mills's method of causalism. Where is poisoning? Part of it. You see that. But we still gave some 2, some 3 for the effort. So 3/10 and so on. All right. Which wouldn't have been the case if it were just MCQs. And you will see with questions 9 and 10. Okay. Now, question 2 was a detail, like I said earlier, in my immediate feedback after your exam. I want to have myself a merry little Christmas, blah, blah, blah. The gay, as it's being used there, is equivocal. The person is thinking of gay as a happy person, excitement, versus gay as having a certain preference sexually. Okay, these are different connotations of the word being used interchangeably without a notice to the ear. The person is speaking as if whenever you say gay, it meant sexual preference. But the first sense of the use of the word gay in our example is talking about excitement, happiness, okay? So I'm saying that the specific fallacy you are looking for, look at the question. It says, assess the passage above to expose the specific fallacy. You see, emphasize with it's bold. Don't just come and talk about it, but tell us the fallacy being committed. This is unit 10. The first part of unit 10 that discussed fallacies that manipulate language. Equivocation is a manipulation of the language. You can't say any other thing if you have engaged the content. Okay? Specific fallacy is equivocation. Which fallacy category is that? It is the fallacy that manipulates language. Dito, like I've said. Then question 3 says, if you do not, okay, for question 2, if you even stated just equivocation, some will give as much as 4 marks out of the 5. Just stating the equivocation and explaining. You go 4. Very liberal marking. Okay, because people may not have added the fallacy category. So if we saw that you know the fallacy, then we give them as much as 4/5. If you didn't know at all, then some would talk and explain that the person is moving from one of the connotations of the word gay to another without indicating the shift. We still notice that the person knows it, just doesn't have the label equivocation for it. We give at least 3 or 4 for that also. Okay. Question 3. Multiply flaw. We said the passage above has plenty errors. Flaw means error. Multiply, it's multiplied. Plenty flaws. That's the question. Okay. So the passage above has so many flaws in it. Identify and explain each of the flaws. If we go through, you see more than 3 or 4 of them. You see the first part, if you do not marry me, you leave me with no choice than to kill myself. It appeals to threats, argumentum ad baculum, that is, or appeal to force, or you can say appeal to consequences. They are all describing the same fallacy. So you show us that this first part of the reasoning, the person's reasoning, appeals to force, or appeals to threats, or appeals to consequences. That is what we mean when we say identify it and explain. Show us. Don't just list fallacies, because there were so many fallacies. You could list any of them and WAPO to fall in for you. Not just list them, but show, identify. So show that this part, and I think that this question people did very well, relatively, with it. It's also a Unit 10 question. Unit 10 was done in 2 parts, very broad. You choose the first part, so that is threat. You should have pity on a poor 40-year-old like me who is becoming a laughing stock among her peers and needs a man to make her fulfill. That's appeal to pity. Straightforward, argumentum ad misericordiam. Okay. Some said appeal to vanity. We marked it because you can see that in other texts, the textbook and so on. Okay. Then Adjo and Aquile got married at 40 this year. Obviously, every lady is getting married. From your argument of Adjo and Aquile getting married, you conclude that every lady is married. That's hasty generalization. From 2 instances, we talk about the whole. Now, we notice that people may not be able to identify all the fallacies. So we said if you identify and explain any 2, just 2, we give you the full mark 10. You see why some got 48 over 50. Not a very big number, but still very significant number. 45, what's it in the 40 columns. Then a good number in the late 30s, so 35, 36. These are very good performances because people did it at the exam hall, supervised, you see, and they are written. It's not pick and choose. So maybe the person just did abrupt picking and got the mark. No, these are people who answer the question. Okay, 35, 36. There's a good number also in the 30s. In the 30s, okay. We have some also in the 20s. And then the remnant of Israel. I call them remnants. Okay. So we'll see how we'll work around that. But this was one of the questions that was well answered by many of you. If you picked any 2, identified it and explained it, not that you say the first statement, if you do not marry me, you leave me with no choice, then you say it is appealing to the masses. That's not true. It is appealing to threat. So you have to connect it well. Okay, very good. Then question 4, I keep running to my lecturer just before our critical thinking lecture. I think he might be observed with me. Okay, you may just be confusing the correlation for causal connection. The 2 things are happening at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. That's one. Or you may even see, and one of my TAs prompted me about that, you may even see overlooking a common cause. They all go there for something else. So you go there to learn. The lecturer comes there to teach. And so it is not one causing the other. There's something else that makes them go there. So overlooking something else that is common. See a cause, something causal factor that is common to the 2 of them, which is nothing about obsession. Okay? So either of them, when you write, you get the 3 marks. Okay, so it was the weak causal inference we're looking for. Question 5, explain why falsifiability. No, if a statement cannot be false, it is not scientific. It has to be capable of being false so that it makes sense to go research, and find out whether it is actually true or actually false. Okay, that's what scientific statements are. Science, observation-based. So why will I need to go and observe anything if no matter what I observe, a statement will not be false? Okay, that is the nature of pseudo-scientific statements. They pretend to be testable, scientific, verifiable, and yet no matter what you observe, they are already true. Such statements are useless to the scientists, like tomorrow it will rain or it will not rain. Ghana will win the match or Ghana will not win. Those are non-scientific. Say that this year, Ghana's president will be female. That's a testable statement. That's a verifiable statement. We can test it. So it's science. What is the testing here? We wait and see and observe. So when the end of year comes and there is no female president, then what was said was false, scientifically tested. When it happens that there was a female president at the end of the year, then what was said is true. That's what makes it science, not something that cannot be false because of how it's packaged. That's a pseudoscience. Okay. The whole thing I've said is Unit 7. Using an example in each case, distinguish a fallacy of weak induction from a fallacy of irrelevant. If it's a weak induction, you don't have enough premises to ground the conclusion you are drawing. That's the error you find. That's the fallacy. It is weak. So the premises are relevant to the conclusion, yes, but they are not enough. It's weak. It's not strong enough to carry the conclusion it is drawing. That's the problem we have with fallacies that we call weak induction, like hasty generalization. Okay, but fallacy of irrelevance, or some call it fallacy of relevance. The thing is not about it being weak. No, this one, the premise you are giving is not connected to the conclusion. It's not relevant to it. Like if you say Nana Addo cannot be president because he's too short. The height of the person is irrelevant to his qualification to office. That's the point. So here it's not that it is not a sufficient enough grounds. Okay, here the premise is not even relevant at all. That's the difference, and I gave you evidences to show that. In question 7, I asked you for a political argument that demonstrates the fallacy of ad hominem. This logistic, negative. Ad hominem attacks the person. So the negative one, not the eulogizing. The few scripts I saw for this question, some were eulogizing the person. Oh, I think the finance minister should be this or that because then you start adding positive attribute. That's ad hominem eulogistic. The dyslogistic would be a fine example, would be the example I gave earlier. I don't think Nana qualifies to be president of Ghana because he's too short, or because he's so and so. So you use he comes from so and so place. You are saying don't accept him, negative, because of circumstances about him. That's dyslogistic. That's a typical example. Then question 8. Taking the following proposition as a so here we give you a conclusion and ask you to give us a premise that will make the argument what? Genetic fallacy, genesis, an error that arises because you are focusing on the source of the thing to accept or reject it. Because you can remember my example in class about China. Say it's a China product, so it is no good. Oh, this one comes, it's an American this so it's good. How? Necessarily? Not necessarily. It could come from so and so place and still not be, because of perhaps different weather conditions or different, biological or physiological makeup. That is why you just can't say because it came from a source that you mentioned a source, so it's acceptable. Also, it is not acceptable. So you are supposed to create such a fallacy that will conclude with this. So this is a conclusion we've given you. Create a premise that will add to this to create an argument that commits genetic fallacy. You could say that, oh, this democratic system, the democratic system of that you mentioned a certain country or a certain place is very effective there. Then you conclude that democratic system is what we need to improve Ghana's governance system, for example, something like that, or around that will commit the fallacy of genetic fallacy. And you end your 3 marks. Look at questions 9 and 10. They were meant to be bonus for everyone. I didn't expect anyone to get it wrong, not a single person. You see, that's why I'm so happy we didn't do MCQs for your over 50. Look at it, question 9. If you study, then you will pass. Kojo studies, so he will pass. This is a valid, this modus ponens is deduction and it is valid. So A, that's the answer. Look at B, question 10. Most metals expand when heated. Iron is a metal, so iron will likely expand when heated. This is not valid. Okay, this is induction, but it's a strong induction and the premises are true, actually out there. So this is a induction that is cogent, B, finished. Now look at option C and D. It's not an option you should take. She says deduction and cogent. If an argument is a deduction, how can it be cogent? Cogency is not a label for deduction. It's like saying the color smells good. Colors don't smell. You see, they don't have a scent. They are about sight. So if it's deduction, cogency doesn't connect to it. And if it's induction, it can be valid. Okay, the same thing. You can't describe colors as smelling good. Think of it that way. So C and D were not options at all if you understand them at all, and you should. Unit 6. And so E will be out. And that is why, at least if you switched A and B, it is wrong, but it's at least it's okay. But those who went way off, some were even diagnosing and breaking down. When I'm giving you options, I say choose one. We're writing things, A or B. Or if you like, write deduction and valid or induction and quotient. We were writing plenty things, the whole page. Anyway, there were not many, but they were still in the box. So if you went through, the feedbacks we have given you, you should be able to work out where you fall within, and then anticipate how you fared in the exam. Okay. If you did very well in the exam, it's already a good sign, because that is a real test of what you are capable of doing. Okay, because you were supervised. I will look at your continuous assessment and see how we augment your effort in the exam with it. And great. Now, please give me time. Over 3,000. Okay, and entries are done by a single person. The results are connected to because of accountability. So you give us time. We do this all the time. Just give us time. No patronizing emails. If you do that, I'll pick you out and give you up to the authorities that be. Let us finish. When results are finally uploaded onto the MIS, where you see it on your transcript, you receive a notice on Sakai announcement, as always, that total or final moderated results have been uploaded. You know the grading scale for the university. 80 to 100 is an A, 0 to 44 is an F, 44 to 49 is an E. So 0 to 49 is a receipt for all UGRCs. If you make a 50 and above, it's a pass. And then the narration for those 50 all the way to 100 is clearly stated in your handbook. I've given you a good breakdown of them. Okay, those who did only the final exam, because let's look at the reason, because they are resitting the course, regular visitors, and their registration was uploaded onto the site very late. Like I earlier mentioned, or put a note on file, your final exam will be converted over 100 to make up for that loss. The reason being that you couldn't have been on Sakai to have been part of continuous assessments. Okay, so it means that you can't be directly at fault for not being on the site at the time of assessment. So don't go expecting that from any other course, because this course is fully taught online for DE. That is why. Another course may have physical lecture time. So even though you were not properly registered, you should then have gone to the lecture hall and learn while your registration issues were being sorted. Okay, so for this one, you have that workout. So if you got, say, 20 over over 50 in the final exam, then times 2 will be 40. See that? To 40 over 100. If there is any moderation, you will moderate the result upwards, and it's +5 for everyone. Then you get 45, which is still a receipt. I'm just giving you, and maybe I should use a positive example. So if you got 30 over 50 in the exam, it means you're a good student, relatively. You just didn't get the opportunity to do that. So we don't record 30 over 100 for you. No, we don't do that, even though we didn't do that. Continue. I'm talking about reciters, not regular students who decided or for some reason didn't do assessment. That's a different discussion. Okay, so when all results are finally done, you'll see the final on the MIS. Now on Sakai, your interim assessment results have been released. The assessment 1 results have been released. The assessment 2 results have been released. So interim assessment 30, assessment 1 10, assessment 2 10. That's over 50. So that your final exam 50 would have added up to give you the 100 that you need. Then some missed the assessment 1 and missed the assessment 2. We reopened. That is what we call the make up for those who missed it. Some didn't miss it, they went to take it. And there were clear instructions on that. Now you're giving us a lot of work to do, mopping up. So if you are not patient with me to do that mop up, I will apply the rule and score 0 for those who repeated assessment that they had already done. Because it's a lot of work, mopping up. You have to go through now and find those who actually didn't have submission and did it. they are entitled to that makeup mark, not those who already had marks and had gone to do the makeup. So now they have double. You see that they have earned themselves an additional 20 to the 100 that they are working for. So you have to go through each assessment and pick them one after the for over 3,000 of you. That's why the makeups have been blocked now. You can see that, you can see it in your grade book. Give us patience. Let us do the sorting. When all that is done, I'll tell you, go to your makeup, go to your whatever and check. Makeup results have been released, and the makeup results have been released for assessment 2. Then now you can find your over 50. Thank you very much for audience. If you have questions, send it to the email I've given you for that. I'm glad to respond to them and give you the peace of mind you need. Congratulations to many of you, and all the best to the rest of the class. Take care.